So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. And so with all my heart, I welcome you to tonight's program and into my home temple here. So we're still in that kind of interesting space, being able to both take the advantage of the technology that allows us to go all the way to Ben in Australia to people nearby. So it's very good in that way. So again, with all my heart, I welcome you to tonight's program. And tonight is the program in the sequence that we do, where we do more of a reading contemplation. So we'll be getting to that in a little while. We're going to start out with the opening mantras. And the opening mantras are both an invocation of what our highest nature is, and they're also clearing for the mind. Now, mantra and this throb of consciousness that takes the form of mantra, when we're chanting it, when we're hearing it, when we're immersed in it, it really helps to clarify the mind and free it of all the concerns, all the things it's gotten identified with, caught up in. And so we get to set that aside and come into this moment, into the presence. And that brings us into the living presence of the divine, your true nature. So we're going to start with those opening mantras now. And if you'd like to just listen to it, open that heart space to notice how this throb of the infinite can move through the body, move through our consciousness, move through our mind, and open up the spaciousness of being that is our true nature. So here we'll begin. Shrimata Kalim Devi Ki Jaya Prajananam Bhutaganari Sevitam Kalpita Jambu Palacharu Bhakshanam Umasutam Chokam Vinashakarakam Namami Vigneshwara Parapankajam Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shrimata Kali Mandevi Ki Jai. So once again, I welcome you. And in that stillness, in that silence, that mantra opens up the spaciousness of being so we can know it directly. And that's where we come to rest. That's where the practices bring us back home to. And one of the practices is contemplation. And so our programs always have teaching, contemplation, in the classic traditions of the Eastern meditative practices, both Buddhist and yogic, hearing the truth, contemplating the truth, then meditating on the truth, merging on the truth. These are the practices that then open that direct experience so we can live in that space, so we can walk that into the world. So no matter what happens, we have a steadiness, a groundedness of being to be able to be present with. And so tonight, I wanted to share something from one of the great sacred texts of India and the Hindu tradition, the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is like the Bible to Hinduism. You know, it's a central text. And a few weeks back, we were doing a story about Yudhishthira, this great king who figures prominently in the Mahabharata, this great epic poem in the Hindu tradition. And the Bhagavad Gita is a chapter within that larger body of the Mahabharata. And in it, it's a particular focus of a dialogue between Arjuna, who is King Yudhishthira's brother, and one of the 5 kings, 5 Pandavas, who are going to rule that land. But it's the culmination of the Mahabharata and all the lessons on Dharma and Adharma, good and evil, and all that, how that unfolds in the interplay of human relationships between family members, everybody. So it's an exquisite text on that, and it comes to a head in this particular chapter where there's this dialogue between Arjuna, who is, you know, like one of the battle commanders for the side that's on the side of Dharma. And who represents Dharma? Who's the embodiment of Dharma? But Lord Krishna himself. And so in this unfolding of the Bhagavad Gita, happens at this time when the 2 great armies of the 2 sides of the family in the Mahabharata are faced off against each other. And into the sort of the middle ground between these 2 armies, Arjuna rides his chariot and stops. And there he's looking at, both sides have loved ones, uncles, relatives, people he's cared, teachers that he's studied with, people that mean so much to him, and now he has to fight them. And so he pulls up, and Arjuna's charioteer is Lord Krishna. So Dharma is literally running the show there. And he stops to turn to Lord Krishna and get instruction, because Lord Krishna is also his guru. So the Bhagavad Gita is also renowned for its sort of explication of the guru-disciple relationship. And so a lot of what happens and transpires between Lord Krishna and Arjuna is also connected to and displays teachings on the guru-disciple relationship and the unfolding of the paths of yoga. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the different chapters will go into different aspects of yoga. So there'll be a chapter on the yoga of knowledge, or the yoga of action, karma yoga. That's what we're going to be looking at tonight. The yoga of wisdom, the yoga of renunciation, the yoga of meditation. So chapter after chapter is going into different aspects of the path. And that's why also the Bhagavad Gita is studied and contemplated and meditated upon. It's also chanted. With Swami Muktananda and ashram in Ganeshpuri, we used to chant the entire Bhagavad Gita. And sometimes there would be what are called Gita Saptas. So the Bhagavad Gita would be chanted several times a day for 7 days. And so a chance to really become absorbed in the chant and in the mantras, in the contemplation of the practices that are expounded in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, one of the most famous commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita is contained in the text that I'm going to be reading from tonight, and it's called Jnaneshwar. And Jnaneshwar was a great siddha. He was a great realized being, an extraordinary realized being. And Jnaneshwar wrote this commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and he was a fully realized being early on in life. And he wrote this commentary on the Bhagavad Gita in his adolescence, right? And it, to this day, is studied as one of the most treasured commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. And Jnaneshwar was a real bhakta, a real really connected to heart and devotion, and very much also connected to the devotion that is in the guru-disciple relationship. His guru, another great Siddha master, was actually his older brother. And you get the flavor of that devotional aspect in his writings and his sublime understanding of what was happening in the Bhagavad Gita. And so this is from chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm going to be reading, and parts of it are going to be the words of the Bhagavad Gita and the quotes from that. Parts of it are going to be what actually Arjuna is saying, or Lord Krishna, and then parts I'll also say this is what Jnaneshwar is writing, often writing in the voice of the one who just spoke, whether it was Arjuna or Lord Krishna. And so this is chapter 3, and it's on karma yoga. Karma yoga is the yoga of action. This is particularly important in this day and age because householder sadhana, doing our practices, living in the world, living in relationship, being husbands, wives, sons, daughters, working in the world, this age is the time to realize and do the practices in the world. So karma yoga is particularly important for our lifestyle, to be informed by how is this a path to yoga union. Yoga meaning union, attaining the highest. Attaining the highest through action. Now Arjuna starts asking Lord Krishna at the beginning of this, because the previous chapter was all about knowledge and wisdom, not about action. So now Arjuna is a little confused. So he starts out, and Arjuna says to Lord Krishna, if it is your conviction that knowledge is better than action, O Krishna, then why do you urge me to engage in this terrible action, the battle that he's about to fight? And so Jnaneshwar writes, Arjuna said, O Lord, I have listened to your words attentively. O Krishna, it appears from them that action and agent no longer exist. If this is your definitive opinion, then why, O Lord, do you call on me to fight? Aren't you ashamed to incite me to carry out this terrible action? You condemn all action, and then do you urge me to cause this destruction? Oh, Krishna, consider this. You approve of the cessation of action, and yet at the same time you command me to kill? So he goes on, Arjuna saying, with speech that seems equivocal, you confuse my intelligence. Tell me surely this one thing. How should I attain the highest good? And Jnaneshwar writes, O Lord, even if you should advise us in this way, what should we ignorant people do? Would this be the end of all discrimination? See, viveka, discrimination, the ability to differentiate between the highest and the self and everything else, is what he was talking about in a previous chapter. If this is really your teaching, what can false teaching be like? Now all our eagerness for knowledge of the divine is truly finished. If a physician were to prescribe a healing diet and then himself give poison, tell me, how could the patient survive? This advice which you have given us is like setting a blind man on the wrong road or giving an intoxicating drink to a monkey. In the first place, I am ignorant, and then I am completely confused. Oh, Krishna, this is why I have asked for your guidance. How strange are your ways. This is confusing in your teaching. Should you behave like this toward a disciple? With my body, mind, and soul, I ought to place confidence in your words. But if you behave like this, then everything is finished. If you're giving me advice like this, then you really aren't uplifting me. How is there any hope of gaining knowledge? Not only is there nothing new to learn, but my still greater harm has been done, for my mind, which was steady, has become perturbed. Beside, O Krishna, I cannot understand your ways. Do you want me to test my mind under this pretext? Are you deceiving me, or does your teaching have hidden implications? When I consider it, I truly cannot understand. So I listen, O Lord. Do not speak of such deep meaning. Tell me those things in Marathi. See, Jnaneshwar wrote and Marathi, which was the language of the people. Most texts at the time were all written in Sanskrit and weren't accessible to everybody. So here, Jnaneshwar is stepping out of the tradition and writing in a way that everybody could understand. My understanding is truly very dull, but I will listen well, O Krishna. Speak with certainty. If a disease is to be cured, medicine must be given, but it should be sweet and palatable. So tell me clearly, what should I do and what will be beneficial to me later? So now Lord Krishna answers. And so Lord Krishna says, in this world, there is the twofold basis of devotion taught since ancient times by me. O Arjuna, that of knowledge, the yoga, the followers of Samkhya, and that of action, the yoga of the yogins. Surprised by these words, Lord Krishna said, O Arjuna, listen to the deeper meaning of what I have said. While explaining the yoga of discrimination, at the same time I have expounded Samkhya philosophy. You have not understood my purpose, so you have been needlessly confused. You should realize that I have spoken about both of these things. So listen, O best of warriors, I have revealed these two paths in this world, and they have existed eternally. One is called the path of knowledge, and is followed by the sages, those who tread in and attain to self-realization. The other is known as the path of action. Seekers who become proficient in it eventually reach the final liberation from worldly life. Though these two paths seem to be two, ultimately they become one. Just as food, whether prepared or unprepared, gives the same satisfaction. Just as two rivers which flow east and west seem separate, but eventually both merge in the same ocean. Similarly, both of these teachings have the same goal, but the practice of them depends on the person's ability. A bird can seize a fruit even when it is flying, but can a person do this so swiftly? Climbing from one bough to another, he will eventually reach the fruit. Like the bird, wise men who follow the path of knowledge may quickly attain the liberation. But yogis also attain perfection in due course by resorting to the path of action and performing their duties, fulfilling their Dharma. So not by abstention from actions does a person attain the state beyond karma, and not by renunciation alone does he approach perfection. See, by failing to carry out his duties, a person cannot become free from the obligations of performing actions, as in the case of a perfected sage. O Arjuna, it is both useless and foolish to say that a person can become free from his duty, his dharma, merely by not doing it. When it is necessary to cross a river, can it be done by abandoning the boat? If a person is to satisfy his hunger, he either must cook food for himself or accept what has been prepared. As long as a person is not free of desire, he must perform actions. When he attains contentment, then his activity naturally ceases. Moreover, in action, something that can be performed or abandoned, can it be done at will? To say such a thing would be ridiculous. You must carefully think this out. Remember that, beyond all doubt, a person does not renounce action merely by avoiding it. Krishna goes on to say, indeed, no one, even in the twinkling of an eye, ever exists without performing actions. Everyone is forced to perform action, even action which is against his will, by the qualities which originate in the material of nature. So he who sits, restraining his organs of action, while in his mind brooding over the objects of sense with a deluded mind, is said to be a hypocrite. See, those who give up right action and seek to become free from action merely by controlling the tendencies of their sense organs have not really given up action, for the thought of the action still remains in their minds. Such an outer show is contemptible. So he's talking about also having the discrimination, this know that, so even when you're sitting to meditate, if you're allowing the mind to just go on and on and on about its actions, then in a sense that's hypocrisy. The yogi has to reel in the mind, has to get it free from performing even the action of thinking. Having not really given up action, for the thought of action still remains in their minds, such an outer show is contemptible. O Arjuna, there is no doubt at all that such people are completely attached to the sense objects. Listen to me, O Arjuna. I will explain to you the characteristics of those who are detached from their senses. But he who undertakes the control of the senses of the mind, Arjuna, and without attachment engages the organs of action in the yoga of action, this is superior. See, a person whose mind is firm, who is absorbed in the highest self, yet is outwardly active like other people, who doesn't act under the impulse of just the senses, who is not afraid of contact with the sense objects, who doesn't avoid any proper action, who isn't carried away by the waves of sensory stimulation, although he uses his senses to perform his actions. Such a person is not bound by desire, nor is he contaminated by the darkness of delusion, just as the lotus leaf remains untainted by the muddy water on which it floats. In this earthly life, such a person appears to be like everyone else, in the same way that the reflections of the sun in water seems to be part of it. Although such a person seems to be quite ordinary, if one observes him more closely, one cannot know his true disposition. Recognizing him by these signs, you will know that he is liberated and free from the bonds of desire. O Arjuna, he is a yogi, highly regarded in this world, I tell you. Try to be like him. Control your mind, be steady of heart, and then your senses may freely perform their actions. So perform your duty, for action is indeed better than non-action. Even the mere maintenance of your body could not be accomplished without action. See, aside from action, for the purpose of sacrifice, the world is bound by action. Perform action for the purpose of sacrifice, Arjuna, free from attachment. Jnaneshwar comments, O beloved, know that a person's duty is his daily sacrifice. See, in the sacred traditions, sacrifice makes life sacred. Sacrifices, we're offering something to the highest. And so everyday actions, everyday duties, our Dharma, is offered as a sacrifice. It's not done for personal gain, personal pleasure, personal fulfillment of desire. It's done as an offering to the infinite. So when a person gives up his duty and develops a liking for wrongful action, then bondage to earthly life follows. Therefore, the performance of one's own duty is ceaseless sacrifice. He who does his duty creates no bonds for himself. This world is bound by action. He who is swayed by the senses is deprived of performing his daily sacrifice. O Arjuna, I will tell you a story about this. See, having created mankind along with sacrifice, Prajapati, the Lord of creatures, said, by this sacrifice may you bring forth, and may this be your wish-fulfilling cow. By this sacrifice may you nourish the gods, and may the gods nourish you. By nourishing each other, you shall attain the highest welfare. The gods, nourished by sacrifice, will indeed give you your desired enjoyments. He who enjoys these gifts while not offering to them in return is a thief. See, the good who eat the remainder of the sacrifice are released from all evils, but the wicked, who cook only for their own sake, eat their own impurity. So everything is offered up. I remember living in the ashram. There wasn't a meal that was served that wasn't first offered to the divine. a puja in the kitchen. Everything was offered up. And then everybody ate the leftovers of what had already been offered and taken by the divine. Now was pure. We had done our Dharma. We had fulfilled that. And now, free of anything, we could consume that and not be bound by any karma attached to it. That's the understanding that as we go about our life and go about our actions, we're offering them up. Keep offering them to the highest. Keep offering their highest self within, the highest self within everyone, the highest self embodied by creation. That's what gets us free of the bondage from action and karma. Krishna goes on to say, know that ritual action originates in the Absolute, in Brahman, and Brahman arises from the imperishable. Therefore, all-pervading Brahman is eternally established in sacrifice. So sacrifice is the invocation, the recognition, the connecting to the Absolute, the infinite in the moment, through whatever might be doing, eating, sleeping, performing our duties. It's all now connected to that offering. Lord Krishna goes on, he says, he who does here on earth turn the wheel and thus set in motion lives, Arjuna, maliciously, full of sense delights, and in vain, he is bound by karma. He whose delight is only in the self, in the highest, whose satisfaction is in the self, and who is content only in the self, for him the need to act does not exist. Therefore, constantly unattached, perform that action which is your duty indeed. By performing action while unattached, one attains to the Supreme. Perfection was attained by kings like Janaka with action alone. For the mere maintenance of the world, you should act. Jnaneshwar writes, King Janaka and others attained the bliss of liberation without giving up any action. Therefore, O Arjuna, carefully observe your duty. There is another good thing which results from this. If we ourselves perform action, others will follow our example, and in time they will avoid calamity. Even those people who have achieved their desires and have attained non-attachment must perform action for the sake of the people. Just as a man who can see will lead the way for a blind man, in the same way, those who know the path should point it out to those who don't know it. If we don't do this, how could the ignorant understand? How could they know the path? So even having attained the highest, it's like the Bodhisattva vow in the Buddhist tradition, you continue to live and serve by continuing to point the way for others to get free of suffering and bondage. Lord Krishna goes on saying, whatever the greatest man does, thus do the rest. Whatever standard he sets, the world follows that. In this world, writes Jnaneshwar, whatever the older people do, others usually regard it as a duty and try to do the same. So naturally, work should never be abandoned, and above all, good people should perform that good work. For me, O Arjuna, there is nothing whatever to be done in the three worlds, nor is there anything not attained to be attained. Nevertheless, I engage in action. So here's Lord Krishna delivering this teaching to Arjuna. Lord Krishna is an emanation of the infinite. He's an avatar. He's come just to bring Dharma and uplift Dharma in the world at a time when it was so dark. And so he's saying, in this state, I don't need to do anything, but it's for the good of all that I perform actions. That's why he's there. That's his sacrifice moment by moment. He goes on to say, indeed, if I, unwearied, should not engage in action at all, mankind would follow my path everywhere, O Arjuna. If I did not perform action, these worlds would perish, and I would be the cause of confusion. I would destroy these creatures. So, O Arjuna, writes Jnaneshwar, why should I speak to you of others? Look, myself, and act in the same way. One cannot say that I perform my duty because I am in some difficulty or because I need someone. You know that I possess powers unequaled by anyone else in the world. How then do I perform my duty? I do it as if I desired the fruit of it. I have only one motive. All creatures are dependent on me, and they must not be led astray. If I were to remain content in the self, with all my desires satisfied, how could people attain salvation? If they saw my ways, they would follow my ways, and the stability of the worlds would collapse. So while those who are unaware act from attachment to action, O Arjuna, so the wise should act without attachment, intending to maintain the welfare of the world. Jnaneshwar writes, therefore, especially a person who is powerful and who has great knowledge should never stop working. The disinterested person, the dispassionate person, should work with his whole heart in the same way that a foolish person works who hopes for the fruit of his actions. O Arjuna, the stability of the worlds must be maintained. Therefore, we should follow the path of duty and show the way to people, and we should consider ourselves not to be different from them. So in this way, in that chapter, Lord Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, yes, your duty on this battlefield is to engage in these actions. But do it with detachment. Do it with, you bring that discrimination, that wisdom, to know the infinite, to know the self as yourself. And see that the actions that have to be performed are really the outcome of the karmas. Later on he talks about the three qualities of nature, of the nature of being, the gunas that give rise to the actions, but not from your sublime, boundless, totally free self. You're performing your actions as an offering. You're performing your actions for the good of all. You're performing your actions to uphold the Dharma in the world. And so Arjuna has this critical role to play on that battlefield, and the battlefield is symbolic of life. It's the battlefield that we all exist in. And we see the good and the evil. We see the play of dark and shadow within ourselves, within the world, within politics. And we have to see, what's our Dharma? How do we uphold Dharma? Especially in this time where Dharma is at its lowest ebb. And so the Bhagavad Gita is an explication. It's the teaching of Lord Krishna to his disciple, the great blessed one Arjuna, so that all can learn this lesson. How do we sustain our Dharma? How do we fulfill our Dharma on the battlefield of life, even while knowing the highest? Because we just can't abandon action. We just can't sit down in the middle of the battlefield and go, I give up. That was Arjuna's first impulse, from just the mind going, I'm so confused, I'm so overwhelmed, I should just sit down and give up. And so really the whole Bhagavad Gita and the different paths of yoga that Lord Krishna is teaching to Arjuna is to help relieve him of that confusion and the paralysis that comes from it. The paralysis is, I don't know what to do. I see good people on both sides. What am I supposed to do? And so the Lord of Dharma, Lord Krishna says, here's your Dharma. You fulfill your Dharma. You fulfill your actions in this way. And be free of all the fruits of your actions. You offer it up and let it go. You have a desire for the outcome. You're just there to make the offering, to fulfill your actions, to fulfill your Dharma, and then be free. And Lord Krishna is actually saying, I am the one who takes it all on. I am the one. Even those who you dispatch on the battlefield are already dead. They all come back to me. So you do your duty and uphold Dharma at this time, in this world, in this way. And that's the teaching of yoga for action in the world, that we offer it in a way that is free of desire, as an offering. And then that's the way we get free of being bound by the outcomes of those actions. So we're staying true to the highest, true to ourself, true to Dharma, and then we live that freedom into the world. When we're doing that, then really our actions reflect the nature of our highest self, the boundless love, the boundless compassion, the boundless wisdom, the boundless strength, the boundless equanimity. These are what come from following that Dharma and living it, walking it into the world. So that's the teaching that comes out of the Bhagavad Gita. So when we contemplate that, you might want to return to that another time, or get a copy of Jnaneshwar. That's Jnaneshwar's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, because there's so much to study and so much to go over and over again. It can inform an entire lifetimes of study and contemplation. So that offering, stepping back, letting go, it's both informed by discrimination, by knowledge of knowing the truth of who we are, and that the actions of the body, the actions of the mind, when they're guided by Dharma and offered as a service, offered as a sacrifice, then we're free. Then we're free. They don't bind us. But we have to have that state of equanimity. We have to have that discrimination to be able to see the truth of that and then live that. And what also empowers us to do that are the additional practices, chanting and meditation, that draw us into the direct experience of who we are, free of the mind, free of the senses, free of the impulses to act, all those different things. Right? So meditation brings us home to that. So we're going to chant the mantra Om Namah Shivaya for a few minutes. And the mantra means I bow to the infinite, I bow to the auspicious one, the divine within. And it's really the power of mantra, the throb of consciousness inherent in mantra, that draws us into that state. Because that mantra and its source are really present within us already. Chanting it, repeating it silently in meditation is really a practice for attuning the mind to what's already there. Your divinity, your fullness, your sublime self is completely present, completely unfolded, completely there. It's our identification with the mind, the thoughts, the actions of the senses, the things that happen. We're in meditation, this thought comes, something, an image appears, a memory. Those are the things that we keep letting go, letting go. Come back to the breath. Come back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Take refuge in the mantra until you're just in the stillness, and then rest there. The mind moves, just bring it back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Pour all the thoughts, all the images, everything, like pouring oil into the sacrificial fire, into the inner yagna of mantra. That repetition can absorb all the energy of the mind and set it free. So we'll chant for a few minutes, and then we'll just sit in the stillness. At the end of the meditation, I'll ring a gong, and then we'll chant a few rounds of Om Namah Shivaya as we come out. So here we'll begin. Mata Kali Devi Ki Jai. until the mind rests on Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Take refuge in the mantra. It's taking refuge in your own divine self. Dissolve into that, into the stillness, and know the divine embrace. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. So we end with this prayer, and may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. And namaste. So the yoga of action, that's the life of a householder. How do we offer up whatever we do? And offering it up means we do it with a selflessness. We do it with a loving kindness, a compassion that helps to inform what we're doing. So it has that quality. It doesn't have to be done perfect. Arjuna isn't learning from Lord Krishna. You have to do everything perfect. It's got to be perfect, and your offerings have to be perfect. No, it's do it with heart. Do it with discrimination. Do it with understanding. And that's what sets us free. That's what it is. Not the perfect thing. The loving act. The act of kindness. The act of compassion. The act of bringing that into the world. That's what makes life sacred. That makes life yoga. A path to union. A path to realizing and living the highest in the moment. Living that divine presence that is the truth of who we are. And living it in relationship to others, so we're recognizing the truth of who they are and treating them with that love, that compassion, that kindness, that patience. That's what's especially called for in this age. You know, we see the outcomes in our world right now of really centuries of living without compassion, without kindness, without generosity for all beings, for all of creation. The world is literally ablaze because of our acting out of ignorance, out of selfishness, out of exploitation, out of using things. That's what we have to set aside. So that's what we want to embody and bring into our everyday life of actions in the world, our relationships. That's what reestablishes Dharma. That's what will help reestablish, the harmony on earth, the taking care of the sacredness of our entire environment is to be in right relationship. Right relationship means seeing and being in relationship to that loving, compassion, kindness. That's what we bring in, and that's what the practices empower us to do moment by moment. So coming back to meditation, coming back to mantra, gives us the power, gives us the direct experience. So that when all the other things are going on in the mind or the world, we're centered, we're steady, we have steady wisdom. That can inform our actions. They may not be perfect actions. They can come from heart, come from that place of love, that place of offering, that place of sacrifice. So watch your actions, watch the mind this next week. Make that part of a practice to become that much more aware of moment by moment. Sacrifice is offering something to the highest, something lower to something higher. Too often we offer something higher to something lower. When we offer our attention, this magnificent attention, awareness that we're given, and we offer it to something low that debases it, that's not sacrifice, that's degrading. Sacrifice is offering to the highest, when our attention resting on what's the highest in ourselves, what's the highest in others, what's the highest that's unfolding in the world. Give our attention, give our energy to that. So we're ending for this evening, and I want to thank you all for coming and bringing the power of your practices, the power of your sacrifice, the power of what you offer through your practices into this world, and being able to walk it into the world and carry it in that way. So thank you for bringing that to this evening, bringing it to every day, and sharing that with others and sharing it with us tonight. The power of your practices informs this whole satsang. So thank you again, and thank you for all the ways that you have of supporting Anamkara through donations, through sharing the e-newsletters and telling people about the YouTube channel, even subscribing. I've been told that subscribing and liking the YouTubes makes it more available to people, so if you feel so moved, you can do that. And I look forward to being able to be with you again next week. So once again, with all my heart, with all my love, thank you for coming.